9:30. Do we have a quorum?
We have, yes, we do.
Awesome. All right, then let's get started at 9:31 this morning. Welcome to the August 2021 version of the California Water Quality Monitoring Council meeting. I'm Karen Mogus. I'm one of the co-chairs of the council. In my other hats that I wear, I am also Deputy Director of the Division of Water Quality at the State Water Board. We will not have Mark Gold joining us today, who is our co-chair under the Resources Agency. He had other commitments he had to attend to. I have not seen the participant list, but I'm hoping that Chad Dibble is on as his alternate. So Chad and I will be tag teaming the meeting today, although this is probably first he heard of any tag teaming. Rest assured, I will make sure that we get through the agenda appropriately, and Chad, you can just chime in as needed.
Great, thank you.
So with that,
happy to be here.
Yeah, well, welcome. With that, let's start with just introductions. Oh, and thank you for this first slide, Nick. As of 9:31, I believe our meeting is being recorded. We are also live streaming on YouTube. Is that right? Is that where you go to live stream?
That's correct.
And so let's go around and do introductions of our council members first. So I've already introduced myself. Chad, why don't you go next?
Morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Chad Dibble, the Deputy Director over the Ecosystem Conservation Division for the Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Okay, I'll just go down the list of sectors. So next in line would be the drinking water program. I know Andrew couldn't make it, but Betsy might be. Oh, yeah, I see Betsy. Go ahead, Betsy.
Yes, good morning. Andrew is on vacation. Betsy Lichty, Division of Drinking Water Quality Assurance Section. And again, we manage our data systems, data intake, and data quality. Thank you.
Thanks, Betsy. Public health still vacant. Regulated community, POTWs, publicly owned treatment works. Shelley.
Hi, this is Shelley Walther, representing the regulated community of publicly owned treatment works.
Thanks, Shelley. Regulated community stormwater.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Grant Sharp with Orange County Public Works, representing the regulated stormwater community.
Agriculture, Mark. I don't think he's here. Community monitoring groups. Helen is out on maternity leave, so she just had a baby, which is good for her. Marianne, are you here? Not seeing her. Okay, next, the public. Ray.
Good morning. I'm Ray Heimstra, Associate Director at Orange County Housekeeping, representing the public on the council.
All right, and scientific community. Steve.
Steve Weisberg. I am with the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project. I'm representing the scientific community.
Good morning, Steve. And water supply.
Good morning. This is Peter Vroom, Deputy Public Utilities Director for the City of San Diego, and I represent the water supply sector.
Good morning, Peter. And the US EPA.
Hi, this is Terry Fleming, representing EPA Region 9. I am a liaison to the council.
Great. For the non-council members, please just go ahead and drop your name and affiliation in the chat, and then we can log that in the future, just for the sake of time and keeping the agenda moving forward. It kind of makes it smoother, I've found, in these virtual environments.
Great, thanks, Nick. I do want to take just a minute to congratulate Nick on the birth of his second baby, a boy, Lucas. Yeah. So any problems with today's agenda or any issues with it, you can blame on me, because I tried to hold it together in Nick's absence, and thankfully Nick kept track of us virtually while he was out. So welcome back, Nick, and congratulations, and glad to have you here to help me run the meeting today. I definitely need it.
No, thank you. You guys did a great job. Appreciate the pick up the slack while I was out. But good to be back. Thank you.
So I'll take a review of our agenda. We're going to finish up our sort of housekeeping first off this morning. Then we're going to the public forum. Next, we'll have announcements and updates from the council members. Next, we'll do an update from the wastewater-based epidemiology subcommittee. It's a tag team presentation between me and Steve Weisberg, who has been taking lead on that working group or subcommittee, I should say. And then that is related to the next item, which is a process for council resolutions, and it'll make sense once we get there. But I think we'll kind of bleed those two items in with each other for the discussion. Then we will take a little 10-minute bio break and resume with updates from the funding subcommittee, the inventory of monitoring subcommittee, an update on the water data symposium, an update from the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, and finally round it out with planning for our next meeting. Are there any comments or suggestions on either the order of the items or any additional items that you'd like to make sure we touch on? All right, hearing none, I will maybe kick it to Nick to go over action items, anything that's outstanding. Looks like we did not receive any comments on them.
That's right.
But want to make sure that we're moving forward. I think most of the ones I was supposed to do, I did.
Yeah, sure. From most of the action items were to, basically to follow through on subcommittees and kind of report back. A lot of it was focused on the work that's going to be reported on today. Like I said, no comments were received on those actions, and for the most part, most of them have been fulfilled. So nothing really dramatic to report there. Although I wasn't around as much as I would be normally. So, but with that,
right, then, yeah. Go ahead, Nick. You go ahead, take over.
I was gonna say, okay. Is there anybody from the public that has something to speak on that is not captured by this agenda? If so, please raise your hand in the participant list and I'll call on you. Give it a minute, and this will be an opportunity to address the council and potentially bring up topics that you'd like discussed at a future meeting. Okay, none today. In the future, if you guys do have something you want to bring up on a future topic or a topic that's going on as part of the agenda, just feel free to raise your hand using the Zoom list and we can queue you up to speak. Let's see. So item 3, member and director updates. Want to start with the co-chairs or?
The only item that I wanted to update the group on is the one that is noted on the slide, which is the proposed AB 1066, which names the council as the primary entity that has deliverables associated with the commitments in that bill. I have been, in my other role, also working closely with the sponsors of that bill to make sure that it makes sense. And what the council is named to do is to provide recommendations to the State Water Board on how to define what is considered a high priority or high use or high risk. I'm not sure where the language finally landed, and I would point you to the current language that you can find on the internet as the definitive source. I haven't looked at it recently. But the council would provide recommendations on how to define that and what criteria would be used to define these areas that we would want to make sure are monitored locally for safe, ensuring that those monitored for safe to swim. So, you know, bacteria, pathogens, that kind of monitoring, similar to what we have established in the coastal areas of the state. So that one is moving forward, continues to be in play. We also have identified resources for the council to do that work as part of it. And so once it gets enrolled, we will be developing a budget change proposal that clarifies what the needed resources are and what we would use them for and how those resources would be allocated. Nick, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you've nailed it. I've been also working with the Office of Legislative Affairs to refine the language and to make sure it makes sense, along with Karen and others at the water boards from a council perspective. And the words that have been updated as the priority inland water contact recreation sites. Pulled up the legislation here, and it's linked in the agenda as well. So I encourage you all to take a look at it. And if you all maybe see something that you would like to, that you see an issue with or would like to weigh in on, feel free to reach out to me, and we can discuss that and find out ways to potentially add that feedback to the legislative affairs. But it's been moving through nicely. It's something that has been needed for a long time. So I was excited to see this legislation and kind of happily surprised that the council was recognized as a key entity to build on the working groups. This legislation is hopefully learning from both the successes and pitfalls of AB 411. So it's kind of an interesting overlap and an opportunity to look at how the ocean recreational sites and that legislation from many years ago has been implemented, and trying to look at filling that large data gap for the inland waters, and hopefully learning from the experience there. So we're excited to work with the legislation on this, potentially get some resources and work with CDPH, which is great since we had already identified them as adding them to the council. This adds another avenue for that and a reason for them to be on the council. So it's all exciting stuff. All right, that's good. Anything from Chad? Any updates from your end from the CNR?
Yeah, maybe just two things worth mentioning. One, some of you may already know, but the department hired a HAB coordinator. That's Jenna Ryan. She's been involved in trying to get herself situated with the different groups and efforts that are going on. So that's slowly happening. And that's important for us to have just that person and able to help out and work through some of these things. I know a lot of it's focused on drought, which is kind of my next update tied to water quality. The department is super involved in all sorts of things, drought across the state, be it anything dealing with fish and wildlife, as you can imagine, fish rescues, water curtailments, working with the board, other parties, providing water to bighorn sheep down in the desert regions and the high mountains. All kinds of things going on. So really that's where we're at, front and center, as the same as everybody else, also dealing with wildfire issues, etc. Heavily involved in all of those aspects and things moving forward. That's really all I had today. I don't have much outside of those kind of things that are nexus to the council.
Great, thanks, Chad. Drinking water, any updates from you?
Yes, good morning. We are also heavily embedded in the drought. And have very quickly, working with our Division of Information Technology, put up actually two different tools. One was a precursor. The next one was just for Russian River. The next one was for statewide reporting from our water systems who have received orders asking them to begin monitoring their conditions related to their water supplies. And so we're kind of for the first time digitally intaking information related to their groundwater levels, intake levels for surface water systems, their status related to availability of supplies, kind of future forecasting, when they think they're going to be out. And we do have some significant issues going on across the state related to water outages already from the drought. So that having that data available has become an invaluable tool for addressing these emergencies and then beginning to forecast how we can work with our water systems. Another big thing that we have rolling out September 1st is our new laboratory intake portal, which we call CLIP for the California Laboratory Intake Portal. And this is a new portal for intake of all drinking water data from our public water systems, and laboratories are expected to do this transition on September 1st, as all labs have to move at the same time. We've been working with them over the past year to make sure that they're ready for this transition. And with this new portal, it's very much, it's modernizing our ability to intake data, and with time, we're going to be able to build in more data quality indicators and validations to make sure that our data is of high quality. So that's very exciting. And then most of you probably know that we were, the water boards was tasked with getting out about $1 billion to water systems and wastewater systems that have had financial impacts from COVID, and that we're calling our arrearages program. And we are hot and heavy getting that program up. And a lot of it also has to do with data. We need information from the water systems in order to allocate, some of this monies to them. So very much engaged in that. That's all we have. Thanks.
Thanks, Betsy. A lot of information there. Let's see. Next up would be Shelley.
Hi, yes. I'd like to report out that I attended the National Environmental Monitoring Conference last week and this week. I co-chaired 3 sessions on microplastics, including one this week on California efforts to regulate microplastics. And there was some really great information about monitoring study design, and also just updates on presentations that we'd seen in the council meetings, especially from Scott Coffin. So some really exciting stuff that's going on. And if you missed it, you can still register for the meeting, and the content, the presentations and PDFs will be available through October 31st. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Second, I am making an announcement today. I've previously given notice that unfortunately today is my last day on the council, and today I'll be stepping down after today. I've been serving since 2016, officially named as a representative in 2018, but I've basically been serving as the rep since 2016. It's really exciting to me to see the council make progress towards their efforts to inform the public about water quality monitoring. And we really have come a long way at least within CASA to how we approach interactions with the council. And when I first started, I was looking for someone to be my alternate, and someone maybe from the north, since I'm in the Southern California, who understood water quality monitoring, and didn't find anyone who was really willing to step up. And Jared was a new hire, and he stepped up and really embraced it, and was really changed the way we were able to communicate with the rest of the wastewater community. And I'm really grateful for that. And so I'm going to ask that that CASA will be working with the council to name a permanent replacement. And I'll continue to be active on the work groups, especially the trash monitoring work group and the JEDI Council Subcommittee. And any other subcommittees that I'm on, depending on how they're defined, whether they're council only or hybrid situation, I'd be happy to continue working on those, such as the inventory of monitoring. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Shelley, and thank you for all that you've done over the last few years. You've been think you became a full-fledged council member right about the time I came on board. So it's been great working with you. And I know that LA County Sands has been a partner on the council for many, many years. And the decision to kind of allow somebody else to kind of step up and take the reins is, I think, a good one. And I'm looking forward to continue to work with you in the future. So thank you. What's next?
I'll just chime in really quickly too, to thank Shelley for all of her efforts. She's been quite an engaged both council member and work group co-chair, I think, at some point, maybe, I don't recall, but at any rate, thank you for just your full engagement. It's been really wonderful to have you on the council and to work with you. You always have thoughts to chime in on issues. You've been very engaged with our development of our strategic plan as well. And so just really appreciate your effort. So we'll miss you, but hopefully you'll have more time to do whatever, all of the other great activities. I'm sure you're engaged in so many things, knowing you. So good luck.
Thanks. Thanks, Kim.
Great. Next up, Grant, do you have anything to report?
Yeah, just a couple brief items to report, but I also want to thank Shelley. Although I'm a relative short timer on the council, it's been just a pleasure working with her, and her contributions have been significant just in the short time I've been on the council, and definitely we'll take her up on the offer to continue to participate in some of the subcommittees like inventory of monitoring. So thank you, Shelley, for all of your contributions. Just a couple brief items I wanted to mention. The California Stormwater Quality Association is putting on a virtual stormwater conference in October. That's going to happen October 26th and 27th. And CASCO has information on that event on their website. The theme this year is going to be recovery and resilience, achieving sustainable stormwater management. This will be the 17th annual CASCO conference. And then also wanted to mention that actually my director, Amanda Carr, has been invited by Dave Smith of US EPA to participate in a event in September. I think it's going to be September 13th through the 15th. And the topic is, it's a national convening on stormwater capture and use. So she is looking forward to participating in that event in Wisconsin in September, and is obviously going to be representing the stormwater MS4 program perspective at that event. We've been having a lot of conversations with water and wastewater agency partners here in Orange County, gathering input, feedback, comments to help inform that discussion that's going to happen in mid-September. And those are all the updates I had.
Thanks, Grant. No agriculture, no community groups. Ray, do you have anything to report?
No report, but I want to echo the other comments and thank Shelley for her energetic work on the council. It's been a pleasure working with you, and you're going to be missed.
Thanks, Ray. Steve, do you have anything to report beyond the items that you have on the agenda?
No, I have 2 items on the agenda, so I'll wait for those.
Okay, that's what I figured. Peter.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So yeah, I've been involved in several things that other committee members have also been involved with. I think one of the most exciting endeavors over the past few months that's kind of related to the council is the bioaccumulation monitoring program realignment that Anna Holder has been instrumental in organizing. We had our first San Diego advisory committee. The group is going to be focusing first on San Diego to come up with some ideas for how to better improve the the Safe to Eat work group. We met with a bunch of tribal groups. It was exceptionally eye-opening for me and also really exciting. Ray, I think, was also involved in that meeting. It was really impactful to hear their stories and concerns, as well as some of their hesitations about potentially partnering with other agencies in California. But I think that one of the outcomes is that we will hopefully be having an in-person meeting, maybe on one of the tribal groups areas. And so that's upcoming. Our next meeting is going to be on September 1st, and I'm very much looking forward to it. I've also been very involved with the wastewater-based epidemiology subgroup that Steve is leading. He'll be talking about that later, so I won't get into too much detail. But again, it's been really interesting to learn all about what is and is not possible. Tracking COVID using wastewater and looking at different variants and stuff like that. And then finally, Shelley will be talking a little bit later about the JEDI subcommittee. Shelley and I did meet yesterday, and we are excited about getting that subcommittee back on track. Shelley wants to remain a very involved member of that group, and so we will be figuring out ways to try and make it a more valuable subcommittee than potentially it's been over the last few months, just because of the inactivity that's occurred. But Shelley, I want to thank you for your support and your excitement, and I do look forward to continue working with you on that subcommittee. So thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And last but not least, Terry, do you have anything to report from US EPA?
No, I do not.
Great. Well, thank you. I guess on to my updates. The baby is doing great. So that's kind of the main thing I've been working on this last quarter. But I've been back since roughly the end of July, and trying to catch up on things. A couple of things to note that have come up in the last week or so. That we are planning through OWEMA and through my work, the council as well, another trash data event, another trash data dive. We tend to make this a primary project for the Sea Grant fellows that come in on an annual basis, and Corey Cutterback is filling that role at OWEMA at this point and helping lead this follow-on event from, I guess this might be the 4th or 5th version of a trash data dive, building on the questions we started back in November of, I believe, 2018. And each one is learned from the past, and it becomes more and more focused on several projects. That data event will be October, I believe, 23rd and 24th. But don't quote me on that. We're still kind of hammering out that details and forming the champions for the different projects that will be working. It is a 2-day event, and we'll be engaging with data scientists to try to hone in on some trash data questions. We've already got some great volunteers in Shelley Moore and Walter Yu and others. And I know Gary Conley, he's on this call. He's been instrumental in past events and hopefully in future events as well. They're generally really well received, and a lot of cool stuff happens in those events. So if you're Shelley, if you're interested, I would encourage you to attend. Anybody else interested in trash and focusing on the event, stay tuned for that, and I'll share that. Another data related event, we had a meeting with Meredith Lee at UC Berkeley in the Big West Data Hub, although I think they might be changing its name or doing something. Anyway, they've been generally in charge of the Water Data Challenge, California Water Data Challenge, and was in a lot of partnership with GovOps. And I think that leadership has since moved on, with Debbie Franco moving on to a different position. So they're looking for increased partners to kind of help keep that awesome event going. And if you don't know, it's generally been a Water Data Challenge where they challenge data scientists and outside, like generally students or young professionals, to take a look at the water data available in California and innovate on it, creating interesting projects. And they have a certain amount of time, and there's cash prizes, and there's some notoriety involved, and there's usually a big event and where it's unveiled. And we've had a lot of great partners come out of those water data challenges. Partners like Rich Palou and Sadie Gill have started in that event, and that's, now they're integral in not only the Water Data Consortium, but in other work groups and work that's being done across California. So awesome event. And we had a meeting, and there was an expressed interest in increasing the partnership with the council on helping with this event. And so that's something that hopefully I will, maybe ask Meredith to come describe at a future council meeting on what they would be looking for the council members to help not only advertise that event, but help just make that event a success moving forward, become a larger partner than just myself, work maybe some of the council members taking a more active role in the Water Data Challenge and helping that be a continued success. Other than that, that's really, there's also the CABW coming up in October, which is the California Bioassessment Workshop. Anybody interested in bioassessment should also sign up for that. It will be a virtual event like all of these events moving forward. So with that, those are my updates. Any questions? Great. Right on time. So let's go to item 4, the wastewater-based epidemiology subcommittee update. I believe Josh Steele from SCWRP is going to lead the initial discussion, and if that's not the case, I can.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay. Let me give you. Let's see, control.
I think, let's see, I can.
There you go.
You guys can see that, and can you see the slide now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I'm going to sort of update you on what the wastewater-based epidemiology subcommittee has been doing. Just to sort of reorient you, we of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought wastewater-based surveillance of pathogens to the forefront of public health, and California continues to be active and even taking a leadership role in some of the surveillance for SARS-CoV-2. We have more than 40 facilities that have been monitoring and have at least 6 months of data, and many of them have more than a year's worth of data now. And a number of them are participating in the national studies, including the NWSS monitoring, as well as some of the HHS studies going on previously and going on currently. You all set up the wastewater-based epidemiology subcommittee to provide guidance on effective data use and interpretation. And this committee, what's special about it is that it includes folks from the regulatory community, the public health community, the wastewater community, and researchers as well. And so everyone came together to sort of look at this and try and see how we could provide guidance. The last time I talked to you, we talked about the survey we did and sort of what we could look at the different measurement methods and collection methods to measure the coronavirus in sewage. And then I talked about our discussions on where to best provide guidance, and which we thought was on some method sensitivity and a few other places going forward. So I'm going to quickly go over that. And since then, we've focused on SARS coronavirus variants in wastewater as well. So I'm going to quickly go through these again and sort of update you on where we are. So the initial thing we did was the survey, and we looked at potential sources of variability in methods to see, was everyone doing everything the same? Where were the differences? What were the important differences in how folks were, the different treatment plans were doing things? So this, I'm not going to go through this step by step, but this just shows you just on the sampling and processing in the laboratory, all the different places you can have different variability in your methods that will affect the results. And so we did the survey. We got about 40 treatment plants to respond and laboratories, the laboratories that were processing those as well. And we were able to get a sense of what methods were different and what were the same and how that would affect things. And that sort of led us into our second, the second thing I'm going to talk about today is the sensitivity of the method. So we initially looked at variability, but we realized that as the pandemic was going into a low prevalence and low concentration of viruses, that sensitivity was going to become more and more important. And so that's what we focused on to provide guidance on different methods and ways to increase sensitivity as we went into that period over the summer. And we put together a document that was sent out to POTWs through CASA. And the recommendations we came up with were these, that if you, and we especially focused on if you had 2 or more of these things that would decrease sensitivity, either that you're heat inactivating, or you're not concentrating, or you're measuring a small volume, or the way you're measuring it, or whether you're using influent or sludge, that any of these things, switching to these recommendations would improve sensitivity. And so we put this in a guidance document that was sent out, and I'm happy to share that document with the council as well. I either email it to Nick, or if there's a better way to share it with all of you, I will do that. And this went out to everybody, and was received, and people started to take a look at it and start to look at the methods they were doing and how they might be able to improve it. We've had an opportunity to take a look at how these sensitivity recommendations play out in at least one plant, and I think a few others, but at one plant we have 4 different groups that were splitting samples and processing these in different ways, including large volume, small volume, and we can take a look at this. And the subcommittee is actually going to be going over these preliminary results from this and from other plants at our next meeting. The basic takeaway from this comparison was that the larger volume concentration, or the digital PCR measurement, were more sensitive. They could detect the coronavirus at the lower concentration, so they were a little bit sooner at detecting it when it was going from lower to higher. The smaller volume methods were not as sensitive, so they were less useful when that prevalence was low. As soon as the prevalence got high, then they also started to trend in a similar way. So the biggest takeaway from this is that our recommendations on sensitivity are looking like we got it pretty good, and we actually gave some decent advice to, or actually more than decent advice, really good advice to the people that were measuring the SARS coronavirus in sewage. So that was sensitivity, and that was the first thing we focused on. And the next thing we thought that was coming up and was important was variance in wastewater, and variance have now become even more important since we first started looking at this. And we recently put together a guidance document that went out to both the wastewater, the POTWs, and to public health departments throughout the state. And again, I'm happy to share that with you guys. Because this was sort of the we focused on variants because they're on the horizon, because they have a high public health impact, as everyone is very aware of right now. And even more importantly, they're not a part of the monitoring programs that are going on. It's still where some areas are trying to track variants in the wastewater, and other areas have not really started to try, or it's something that's still being worked out, and it's an area of active research. The subcommittee considered, should variant analysis become part of this routine monitoring? Are we ready for that to be a part of our surveillance right now? And the answer we came up with, after looking into sort of the state of the science and where everything is in the research, is that it's not ready. It's a very active area of research. It's a very important thing to do, and it could be incredibly useful because of the high public health impact, but it's not an easy thing to do in sewage, and it's the science is just not ready yet, for a number of different reasons. And we put some background and some suggestions and guidance to both the wastewater treatment plants and to public health departments on how we recommend thinking about this, and what we recommend doing instead of including it with routine monitoring. The main points in this document were that wastewater is very complex. especially compared to clinical samples, and you have multiple variants coexisting at the same time. And because of this, you have to infer the presence of these variants using multiple different measurements. There are two main approaches that people are using, and you kind of need to do both. You need to do both a broad screening of the viral genomes that are in the sewage, so just to sort of get a sense of what's there and see what the mutations are. And then you have to then rely on the clinical genomes and the clinical sequences to look for these mutations that are associated with variants of interest or variants of concern that would cause increased public health risk. And in order to verify this, you're going to have to actually take this sewage variant data and compare it to clinical prevalence. And that's sort of where we're at. And these are our recommendations of how to think about this and how to interpret that went out to everybody. And again, I'm more than happy to share that document with you all. And I will email that to Nick, or if there's another way to upload it, I'm happy to do that. And so finally, I'm just going to sort of cover where we're headed next. As I said, we're going to go over the sensitivity comparison. We have this opportunity to look at this in a systematic way. And so that's one of the things we're doing next. And in the sort of the steps beyond that is we are, as a subcommittee, going to start looking at how the wastewater-based surveillance data can be linked or compared to case data and prevalence data, both in total numbers of viruses as well as with the variants. And ultimately, the committee is trying to consider how to build a long-term capacity, or how to help guide the building of a long-term capacity for wastewater-based surveillance. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Josh. Great presentation and update. Anybody have any questions from the council or the public? Or if you're shy, put it in the chat.
Well, Josh, this is Terry. I guess the punchline that I take from this is that you can measure variants, but you can't really tell right now, which ones are going to be bad and which ones are going to be not so bad, unless you do some clinical work. That's the punchline I'm getting from this.
I think that's a fair statement. We know which variant. So if they are variants that have already been identified clinically as something to be concerned about, we can hunt for those. But as far as variants that we should be concerned about in the future, right? We can measure a multitude of mutations in the virus, but we can't predict which one will have that increased risk. At least not yet.
This is Ray, and I've got a kind of probably a dumb public style question, but this seems like so much has happened so fast, and I assume this is just a huge effort. Was this able to actually take advantage of technology that existed? Was this not as big a deal as it seems, or was this actually, as it looks, a huge effort to come up with new ways to identify these?
I think it's somewhere in the middle. There was a reliance on some existing technology, but the application in this case was something that definitely was pushing the science forward. If that answers your question. So it's kind of in between. It was a huge effort. I don't want to downplay that. It was definitely a huge effort on the research community and the wastewater community, and a very impressive effort from the public health community as well. But we were able to rely on some advances in technology that had already been coming, and by applying them to measuring in wastewater, it was something that we were able to move quickly on, fortunately.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, see no other questions. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate all the work you've been doing on the subcommittee.
No problem.
So Nick, maybe I could add a comment or two that might even help us transition into the next item.
Sure.
First off, I think the council needs to appreciate how effective this committee has been, how much work has gone in. I think it goes right to exactly what you're saying is there's a lot of method development that goes on, a lot of intercalibration type activities that are needed, a lot of interpretation, translation that's needed. I think this committee has been a wonderful example of how the council can contribute. I think things have improved as a result. And of course, Josh didn't show you numbers because he's waiting to show those to the committee on Monday, but they really do illustrate how critical it is understanding the sensitivity issue, the true value. The health departments have told us the true value of this wastewater-based surveillance is when you get into the low numbers, because when you have a lot of numbers, the hospitalizations, the kind of testing of individuals really provides them the guidance they need. When the testing starts to drop off because people just aren't doing it anymore, when the hospitalization rates go down, that's when this becomes the most valuable. But it's only valuable if you have adequate sensitivity. And because people, as you were asking, Ray, just kind of like jumped on methods quickly, they didn't necessarily pick the best methods. Sometimes they were bad because they gave you biased results. That's actually not the case in most cases. But they tended to give you less sensitive results, and probably half of the facilities, I think it's more like 60% of the facilities are using methods that are not particularly sensitive. So the kind of demonstrations we're doing will hopefully spur people to, if they haven't already hit essentially the non-detects, to move over to methods that are more sensitive. So I think it's a very big deal. I think the second thing I want to say is, and it's a very small thing, but several committee members have asked, can we rename the committee to be the Wastewater-Based Surveillance Committee as opposed to the Wastewater-Based Epidemiology? There's some similarity between the two, but we're really focused on the monitoring part, the surveillance part, and we're not really doing much work on the epidemiology side. So we thought it'd be more appropriate to call ourselves the Wastewater-Based Surveillance Committee. I don't know whether we need a motion or not for that. Okay, well then I'll start reverting to that. And as the chair, I'll introduce it that way in the future. I think the last thing though I want to do is talk about where the committee is going to go into the future. Josh has talked about the things we've been doing. I think our next big issue is going to be, how do we fight fatigue? People have been doing this for a while. They've been doing it on their own nickel. How do we keep them doing it? And more importantly, how do we build this into something that survives beyond this short-term need for COVID? How do we turn it into essentially a system that is that goes beyond a single pathogen, a single disease? How do we develop a state infrastructure around it? Laboratory accreditation, as a for instance, method standardization within the state. So I think there's a lot left for us to do. One thing, I'll turn to our chair, Karen, and say, Karen, we don't have a representative from DPH presently on the council. We need, I think we've had them come and go. We need that. I think they're starting to think about how they're going to. The good news is we do have 2 representatives from DPH on the committee, and they have been incredibly helpful. In fact, I think that's Josh started out with. The beauty of this committee is it's an integration of academic researchers, wastewater collectors, and the health department, and that is that commonality of thought. So they've been wonderful there, but they are not necessarily at the highest level within the DPH, kind of able to make the policy level decisions about how we kind of move this thing into the future. So I think it is important we gather that kind of person back on the council. And then the last thing I'll have to talk about, as I mentioned, fatigue. That's actually a lead into our next presentation. So you let me know if we're ready to go there, or if Nick, if people want to respond to the discussion I just put forward.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. You are absolutely correct in how successful this subcommittee has been, meeting so frequently, and the work and the review and the feedback has been pretty great to watch from the side, like from the background. I don't add much, but when I can, I do listen in and watch the subcommittee do its great work. I hope that this is an opportunity to build on that, the great work that's being done and can be done moving forward. And I agree that 100% this is a perfect example of where the council in its current state can provide the most value on a statewide level, honestly, and maybe even a national level. Any other comments from the council members or participants on Steve's comments before moving on to item 5?
And I do want to recognize Karen and Peter as members of the committee.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as I said, Nick, I think that's going to be a good transition into the next item. Should I get going on that? There you go. So one of the things the committee is focused on now is how do we keep the enthusiasm up? There have been a number of utilities, as Josh said, who've been doing this for over a year, and they've been doing it at their own expense. In some cases, that expense has been lessened by them having the ability to have other people pay for the processing of samples. There are some big national grants that have happened, a bunch of universities that are helping to support that. But even then, they have the collection costs, which are not trivial. And then you have other utilities that are actually picking up really the whole thing. I see Shelley still here. She's with LA County Sanitation District. They've been real leaders in this right from the beginning. They've been doing it. And not only are they picking up the cost of processing, they actually have their, well, initially at least they had their lab doing it themselves, but they've also picked up the cost of things like the websites where they put the data out for the public to see. What we're starting to see, though, is now people are going, okay, it's going down a little bit. The health departments have kind of maybe looked at our data a little bit, but not enough to justify the cost of what we're doing. Should we keep doing this? For how long should we do it? When should we stop? And so I think this is one of the things the committee is going to be taking on, is how do we help them figure out when is a good time to stop? How is the data being used? Which data sets are most valuable? Which ones we want to keep going with? But as part of that, one of the things that we thought of as a committee is that it would be wonderful to recognize the utilities who have put all of their effort in at no cost, at cost to themselves, and initiated by themselves. This is not something where somebody came to them and said, you need to do it, even asked them to do it. They just saw an opportunity to be good citizens at a time when that kind of data would be useful. And so what we came up with, what we thought would be very nice, is for the council to put out some sort of certificate, some sort of recognition, a resolution, a letter, something that would allow them to be recognized, so that when they go to their next board meeting and their director, whoever that is, says, we want to let you know about what we're doing, they can put forward a resolution that came out of this monitoring council about how they have contributed to society in a very selfless way. But, and this is why it's wonderful that the chair of that committee is also a council member, because now I bring it to you and go, sorry guys, we don't have a process for doing this. We've never done this before. So the question really in front of you is this something we want to do? And if we decide we want to do it, of course, this is a precedent for things we might want to do in the future. So I'm going to give you a few more details, but the item I'm putting in front of you, is this a good thing? Is this something that we want to be taking on as a committee, as a council? I will tell you, I'm very enthusiastic about doing it because I think the cost to us is low and the reward for the people who receive it is high. Go to the next slide, if you would, Nick. So if we're going to do it, again, that's maybe the first decision. Do we want to do it? But if we want to do it, I see there's three things. First off, I've given you one specific, wastewater-based surveillance. But how do we determine what are the other things that we want to provide recognition for if we start this as a precedent? So we need a process for kind of figuring out what elevates to this point. The second is, what does it look like? I said, I gave you examples. I gave you a letter, I gave you a certificate, I gave you a resolution. It's also something that maybe elevates even beyond us. Does the council even do it? or we're appointed by secretaries of 2 agencies, maybe it comes from them. And then of course, the third one is once you identify that you're going to do it, and again, using the wastewater-based surveillance as an example, as Josh said, there are over 40 who have done it for more than 6 months. There's a whole bunch who've done it for here and there. Yeah, how often do you have to do it? What are the rules we use? So I'm going to elaborate on each of those and then open that up for discussion. So next slide, Nick. So the first one, what activities merit recognition? I think that's going to be a hard one because until we start to take on examples, it'll be hard to set the rules. I think it will come apparent, but only through examples. I can't give you rules now, but I think there are a few attributes as I was thinking about it, a few attributes that obviously things that help the council achieve its mission. That would be outcomes that improve the environment or public health. Clearly, this would be an example. So, and then the third one is let's focus on the people who care about it. A researcher sitting off in some university in North Carolina who happens to do something that helps us probably doesn't care about a resolution from the council. But I'm saying in this particular case, I think the utilities will waive that proudly in front of their constituents. So I suggest that the nominations would originate from council members or from our committee chairs or subcommittee chairs. Next slide. The next question, next slide, please, is, so what does it look like? I think this is a particularly interesting question. It could come from the monitoring council. I mean, we have 2 people who have a relatively high prominence who could sign it. And it's the kind of thing, if we do it from council, we can do it and we don't have to involve anybody else. We can do it in a meeting. The process will be straightforward. On the other hand, maybe you want to do it for the agency secretaries who create the council. The upside is a little bit higher prominence in the recognition. On the other hand, now you just added a few months because you got to find the vehicle for communicating to the secretaries and then convincing them. And they have lots of these requests where these fit in. Another one that was discussed by the committee is, are we as a council powerful enough to get it all the way up to the governor's office? And then I give you another example is that in this particular case, the State Water Board has been considering doing this independent of the council. So maybe that's the kind of thing that the council could make recommendations to a group like the State Water Board. We wouldn't do it ourselves. We could have somebody like that do it. So again, all possibilities. We as a council, if we're going to move forward with these kinds of things at all, we'll need to figure this out. Next slide, please. So actually on this one, I'm going to give you a suggested answer because we had a small meeting of a group that wanted to talk about this to prep for this meeting. And the answer in that previous one is actually all of them. These are not mutually exclusive. I think what it does, and I'll speak for myself, but I will tell you that Karen was one of the people on the small group that met, and I think she agrees with what's up here. We'll find out. It starts with the council. The council puts forward a resolution, and before it finishes doing that resolution, it forwards it to the agency secretaries that form us and say, is this something you want to get involved in? Do you want to do it? And they have that option. It may not be, again, mutually exclusive. We may do it and they may choose to do something bigger or better. They may choose to do it for a subset. So for instance, maybe there's a recognition for utilities that did anything at all that comes from the council and a recognition of a higher level that comes from the secretaries. But in either case, it starts with what we are recognizing. So it starts a process. And then of course, you're going to talk about it from the governor's office, same thing. We could communicate to the governor's office that we're doing it. And then they can decide whether they want to supersede us or whether they want to just add on. And the state board, same thing. In this particular case, because Karen is a deputy director for the state board and is the co-chair for this council, she could determine on the spot whether that's something she wanted to move forward. Next slide. So who qualifies? Again, the things that we've been talking about internally with a small committee from the wastewater, a small subcommittee from the wastewater committee is it starts with the utilities. Is there a minimum number of samples, a minimum window of time, a minimum engagement in terms of how they share the data or how the health departments use it? That's tricky. The next one would be researchers. the utilities, it goes exactly what you were saying, right? The utilities didn't have something off the shelf they could grab to do this. So somebody had to be advising them, and there are a bunch of groups that stepped up. Most prominent among those would be UC Berkeley and Stanford, but there are others. So you want to recognize those people because do you want to look at it as what the activities of an individual, or do you want to look at it as the activities of a system of people? And maybe that's what gets recognized. Then you have the processing labs. Some of them are commercial processing labs. They'll just send samples to you. You recognize them. They're just getting paid for what they do. But so these are the kind of things that need to be addressed on this one in particular as an example, but really in any. I recommend that from the council's perspective, we don't make those decisions. I think in most cases, that if we're asking somebody to bring forward a resolution potential, they'll be closer to what needs to be recognized, and they should be the ones to determine, is it targeted around a few individuals who made things happen, or is it targeted around a group of people who made things happen? The council could just react to the entirety of the proposal. Last slide, please. So I think my last slide was going to be just bringing it back. I wrote 3 decisions to make. There's really a 4th decision that supersedes this, is even doing this at all a good thing to do? I'm putting forward it is. I'm putting forward that I would like the council to move forward with a resolution for the wastewater-based surveillance group, and that we then turn to people like Karen to determine how we dovetail that with either a resolution by the state board, or how we float that up the chain to the secretaries to determine whether they want to go beyond what the council's doing. So that's my specific proposal, but around a general question. And I did more talking than we probably wanted, Nick.
No, that was great. Thanks, Steve. With that, I think we'll go ahead and open it up to the council discussion to see your reaction.
Well, this is Ray. Since nobody else is speaking first, I really like this idea. And I think it's a good opportunity not only to really recognize important work and organizations, et cetera, but also elevate the council. So I certainly, what I'm kind of wondering is, can the council do things in addition to passing a resolution, for instance, put out a media release and publicize that? Because I was thinking with this particular issue, especially when they first started talking about, finding COVID in wastewater, it was all over the news. That was big, that was big media. People were interested in that. And I think, we've come a long ways. There's a lot done. So on what qualifies, I'm thinking, this is obviously of national significance, but something of statewide significance. We're a statewide body. So, that would be kind of the lowest bar. I like the idea of, subcommittees or whatever making recommendations. I'm a little leery of going up the food chain because A, they may take it, or more likely that it may just get buried in the bureaucracy, and kind of speed sometimes is of the essence on these things. So anyway, those are just my thoughts.
And thank you, Ray. We had not considered press releases associated with it. I will say I like that idea.
I have.
Okay.
I did want to speak to that because the small group that met earlier this week talked about the desire to coordinate between a resolution, if the council chooses to move forward with one, a council resolution and a water board resolution. And for what it's worth, I'm already proceeding with a water board resolution. We've got support from our board chair on it. And so I've talked to our media people about a press release, the feel good, really recognizing folks for being at the forefront and putting forth their own voluntary effort, that kind of thing. And so it would be desirable to include the council in that, broad press release if we can coordinate the 2 resolutions together. And then in terms of, I just wanted to speak to the putting it up the food chain. Some of what we discussed was exactly what you raised concerns about, Ray, which is timing. Do we wait for the agency secretaries to move Do we move ourselves? I think what we would recommend as a small group, and Steve, correct me if I'm misspeaking, is that we would have a resolution, both the board and the councils kind of refer to each other and put forth a recommendation like we do with other recommendations to the agency secretaries and say, we have recognized these folks at our level. We recommend you agency secretaries do the same. Here's a, I don't know if it's a letter or some sort of, I don't know what form that recognition would take at the agency secretary level, but that would then be the key into also getting up to the governor's office. So I suggest we can do it in a stepwise process, still act ourselves, and then with an eye toward encouraging the secretaries to act as well. So that just wanted to touch on those comments.
So Karen, you are correct. That is exactly what we talked about, and I endorse that myself. So Peter, you're one of the people who would receive such a recognition. Would this be valuable to you? Is this a waste of time? Just an extra piece of paper that shows up on your desks and you don't know what to do with, or is this something you would actually find valuable?
Thank you for asking. I actually wasn't chiming in because my agency would be one of the ones that would probably receive this. So that's why I was kind of remaining quiet. But yeah, this is a type of thing that I think our director would take to city council, to the mayor. It probably would be something that if the council didn't create a press release, the city of San Diego might actually create a press release just to alert our public that we had received this, that we have been doing this monitoring. I think it would be a really kind of good morale booster for the department and for the city itself. So, that's just my perspective from my agency, but I think it's a great idea.
And you just hit upon exactly why the committee put this forward. Because after Peter does a press release on this, he can no longer stop doing it for 6 months because he just said how great it is we're doing. You don't put out a press release and stop the next week. And because we've got this fatigue problem, that kind of recognition we think will actually go a long way to keeping people going. So we have an ulterior motive that initiated this. I think it goes beyond that ulterior motive. But so yeah, thank you, Peter. That provides exactly the perspective.
Can I weigh in too, in that when there's sort of a balance to strike in terms of who qualifies for the recognition, and something I'd like y'all to kind of think about and maybe weigh in on is Peter's mention of a press release and local drumming up of interest would call for us to maybe cast the net pretty wide in terms of facilities that have participated at any level, to continue to encourage that at any level. But at the same time, we wouldn't want a recognition from the council and the board to be worthless either. So there's that balance I think we would want to strike. And I'm curious what y'all think, about the who qualifies piece as well.
So Karen, I love that question, and I want to make sure it's clear. So we have, if we cast a wide net, then you'd end up with probably 40 or 50 utilities all recognized in one resolution. And you'd probably, again, if you cast it wide, you probably should include a group of researchers who helped enable it. That's probably half a dozen people. And then you might even go further with recognizing some of the laboratories. In contrast, you could do something smaller and say, here's the ones that really did a lot. So I guess really in part, Peter, the question that Karen's asking is, would it be valuable as a resolution if you were one of, say, 50 organizations named, or do we need to customize them?
I think recognizing the statewide effort and that we were a part of that broad effort is what is key. It is, we are, as an agency, trying to get this information to understand what's going on in San Diego, but the fact that this effort is being used across the state, it could be used on a national level, and San Diego was a part of that huge effort, I think is exceptionally valuable. Plus also, not only looking at the fact that there's these public agencies that were involved, but also that we are partnering with agencies such as SQUIRP. It's a broad group effort to better public health. And that's key.
I'd like to mention too, I should have said this, is one of the thoughts we had as in our small group was we can craft the language in the resolution to key into particularly stellar efforts that we've had from certain utilities that have gone above and beyond, from not only collecting samples, analyzing samples, also making their data available on a nationwide and local level. So we can craft the resolution to make it clear that some really, really stepped up, and then, almost hear it in the language of the resolution as well. Other thoughts?
Yeah, Karen, this is Grant. I just want to thank you and Steve for bringing this. I think it's a great idea. I wholeheartedly support it. And I think one of the other benefits that this has is that it, I love the ulterior, motive, Steve, that it, kind of reinvigorates the involvement in this and fights some of the fatigue. But I think it also potentially has the ability, and as we start highlighting efforts like this, and what it does, it raises the profile for those involved. And so it could have another positive effect that, other entities may be more inclined to get involved in other efforts in the future. So I really like that aspect of it. I'm all for, telling a story, using this as a way to tell the story of some really good work that's being done, because I've always believed that if you don't tell your story, no one's going to tell it for you. So I love the fact that we're sort of, as a council, making a group decision here that, we want to, use this as a way to acknowledge all the good work that's being done by all these volunteers, in essence, at their own cost. But it's also a great opportunity to tell a really good story. So I love this, and I support it 100%.
I think that's a great opportunity to then, I'm going to propose having a motion and a vote for the council to approve the idea or the action to have some sort of recognition program moving forward, and then with the action for the next meeting, or maybe after that for the co-chairs and potentially a few other council members think about the process for which that would be, and then report back to the group. Does that sound?
So one thing we talked about was the need for speed.
That's true. Yeah.
And so waiting for the next council meeting is probably too long, and maybe we can, I don't know what our requirements are for such a recognition type action. I'm going to guess that even if we don't completely follow the letter of the law, nobody's going to sue us on it, at least not on this particular one. So my suggestion would be that we, and we talked about a resolution, so wanted to make sure that, if we're going to move and vote on this, that the form of the recognition is included in the motion. But my suggestion would be that we either hold a special session just to sort of approve a resolution, or if possible, send around the draft language to everyone, get comments, get a final, get sort of a virtual email thumbs up, and then the co-chairs could be the ones that sign off on the final resolution. Something like that would be my suggestion.
So Karen, I'm supportive of what you just said, but I want to go one step even further. I think what we can do today is develop an agreement that we will, by vote, that we're going to move forward with this generically, and then move forward by vote that we are going to issue one for wastewater-based epidemiology and empower the chairs to work out the details so that you, Karen, then have the option of sending it around to the group, but you don't have to have a formal meeting because you've already got the vote. And that will speed up the process.
Yeah,
And that will get
sense
you
to
off of
me.
any of overstepping because we've already authorized you.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, with that, I have heard a motion from Steve to not only approve generically the idea of a council recognition program, but to also empower the co-chairs to proceed with the initial form of recognition focused on the work that has been done around the wastewater-based epidemiology and surveillance, and empowering the co-chairs to move forward. In the meantime, do I hear did I get that right, Steve?
You did.
And do I hear a second?
I'll second that motion as stated by Steve.
Okay, and then with that, I will ask the current council members at the meeting and alternates to show support by raising your hand. I think that's
Nick, I would suggest, because I run an organization that's subject to the Brown Act, my suggestion is you do a roll call vote. With the governor's exception for meetings like this, a roll call vote is required.
Okay, fair enough. I'll take your suggestion. Starting with Cal EPA, Karen.
Aye, in favor, yes.
So yeah, it'd be aye, in favor, abstain. Chad?
I'm an aye, and I think just one additional comment would be that as we figure out the formal process, that would come back to this council for an approval as for more of a long-term commitment, but I'm an aye on moving forward with the motion.
Great suggestion, thank you. Shelley, is your maybe last action as a council member?
Aye.
Grant?
Aye.
Ray?
Yes.
And let's see, Peter, I guess you probably have to abstain.
Aye.
I think that's a unanimous passing of voting members currently at the meeting. Betsy, sorry. Oh, she's gone. So hearing a unanimous of council members in place, the motion passes, and looking forward to see how this pans out in the future meetings and how we move forward with this. Anything else to add on this item, Steve, before we take a break? Or
Oh, other than I like Chad's suggestion that we agendize at the next meeting. Yep. An elaboration of the process. How did it work with this first one, which would happen intercessionally, and how do we want it to work with the future ones?
So maybe Nick and I can take the action item to just lay out what that process is and bring it forth as a draft for consideration at the next meeting.
Yep. That's great.
Sweet. All right. I think that brings us to a 10-minute break.
That is correct. So we're a little ahead of schedule, which is great. So how about we meet back here at 11 o'clock?
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. See you in 10.
Okay, it's 11 o'clock. Everybody had a chance to get a quick break. Item 6, Karen, I think you're up.
Yeah, so at the last meeting, we talked about the need for us to talk more about figuring out ways that we can obtain funding for the council. And we recognize there are certain, opportunities like the legislation we talked about earlier. There's also, a huge budget surplus that's in play this year, and the desire, of course, to take advantage of that as best we can. We also have some limitations. For those of us who actually work for state agencies, we cannot advocate at the legislature or the administration for funds for our activities. And so we have some limitations in that regard. So a small group of us got together and talked about ways that we could like I said, take advantage of the budget surplus and also communicate our needs clearly and what we would use funding for and those kinds of things, and have a path forward, at least in the immediate term. And maybe I'll turn it over to Steve, who also participated in the discussion. For what it's worth, so did our co-chair, Mark Gold, who had a lot of good input for us as well in terms of who we should be contacting at the legislature with these kinds of requests, and sort of how to, I guess, covertly, from at least the state agency representative participants, try to get more resources for what the council, the good work that the council does. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who is one of those entities who can help us advocate for funding and has taken the lead on putting together an email, I think is the first step, but I'm not positive on that. So go ahead, Steve.
So as Karen said, we had a small group get together. The group wasn't focused just on this letter. They were focused on the large picture, but we agreed that a letter would be a good thing. And there were 3 members of that subcommittee that felt motivated to write such a letter. I took the lead in drafting it. It was circulated among the group so that we had something that we agreed could be sent out. Grant Sharp, myself, and Ray Hemstra were the 3 that were going to sign it. Theoretically, I should have sent it out last week, but when I got sidetracked and realized I didn't send it out at the end of last week, I realized, well, we got a committee meeting coming up right now, and perhaps other members of the larger council might want to sign on to it. Since the legislature is out until next week, I figured I'll just wait till this meeting. So we have a letter. It would not come from the council because there are certain members of the council who cannot provide that kind of advocacy. But there are other members on the council who are empowered to do that. And I guess what I'm doing is saying that if you would like to sign on to that letter, let me know. My plan would be to send it out tomorrow. And of course, if you're wondering what's in it, just send me an email and say, I'm thinking about, I'd like to sign on to it. But I got to read it first, and I'll send it to you. So we seem to have lost Karen. This was a smaller subset of what the funding committee talked about. They're stacked.
No, you haven't lost me. I'm here.
Are you just eating? That's all. I see.
I'm having a little sandwich.
Are there any other council members that would be interested in signing on, reviewing and signing on to the letter before?
All right. So my suggestion is, Nick, is you not try and foster it as a state employee. You should probably stay clear of it. So I'll just leave it as, if you're interested, if you're a council member and you're interested in signing on, please contact me and do so today.
I don't think there's any problem with sort of giving the bullet points of what it says at the meeting today. We're not acting, we're not endorsing, so I think it might be worth just a quick overview.
Okay, it's 4 paragraphs long. The first paragraph gives background, introduces who the council is. and emphasizes our broad consortium of sectors that it represents. The second is kind of talking about needs that need to be addressed, and identifying that the budget surplus, all the things that they're thinking about doing with the budget surplus that involve improvements to the environment need some monitoring systems to ensure that the investments were well spaced. And then it kind of finishes up with, we would be glad to give you more information if you're interested. It also identifies the chairs of the council and says they will not, they cannot reach out proactively to you as we are, but we encourage you to contact them if you would like more information.
So, Steve, you might not have an answer to this, but by signing this letter, are we able to separate ourselves? Like, for instance, could I sign as a council member, but it has nothing to do with the city of San Diego? Or just because I put my name on it, would the city of San Diego already be kind of pulled into that?
Right. So the way that we have it for the three people who have said, only because they were part of the discussion, is it has the name, it has the organization they work for, and then it has what their role is on the council. So for me, it says Stephen Weisberg, Southern California Coastal Water Research Project, science community member of the council. So for Grant Sharp, it says Grant Sharp, Orange County Public Works, stormwater member of the council. It identifies us in the letter that it's being written from individual members of the council. So it is not indicating that your city would approve it. On the other hand, the way that we presently have it is it has the affiliation beyond the council. If that makes you, again, because this is not a council letter, I don't know that we need to go into great depth on it at the moment. If that makes you uncomfortable, but you're willing to sign it as the, I think you were what, the
Water supply.
water supply member of the council, and you want us to get rid of the other affiliations, we can do that.
I would be comfortable doing that. I'm sure the city of San Diego probably would be okay with me signing it, but I would need to run it through the right channel, which means that you would not get a response by tomorrow.
I think, since, as I understand it, the legislature goes back into session on Monday. I'd rather not wait beyond Monday.
Yeah.
So you'd like to sign on as long as I remove the affiliations?
Yeah, if you remove the affiliation, I would be willing to sign it.
Okay. Grant, Ray, do you see any downside of removing the affiliations?
I don't, Steve.
Not really. One of the things I just thought I'd just bring up is that other than the state agency folks, certainly water agencies, cities, etc., do lobbying and stuff on a regular basis. So, you know, kind of like, you know, he was saying is, you know, he'd probably need to get approval. That may be able to happen really quick, depending upon what it is. But sometimes, of course, it can drag out. But just kind of going forward in the longer term of things is that it really probably the state agency folks would be the only ones that would.
Correct. That's why I'm bringing it up. If there are other members of the council would like to sign on. Okay. So Peter, I will send it to you so you can review it. I'll remove the affiliations of the signatories. And that will allow us to add you without having the city of San Diego show up. Sounds like we have resolution on this one.
Sounds like it. Thank you for taking lead on that, Steve. So that brings us to our next item.
So item 7 is the update from the inventory of monitoring subcommittee. Grant, did you want to take over as lead of that? And if I can chime in if you need help.
Sure, I would be happy to do that, Nick. And maybe it might be helpful to actually put the draft of the scope of work up. I can do that. If you don't have it handy, I can share my screen or whatever's easiest for you.
I can share it. Let's see.
So on behalf of this subcommittee, the inventory monitoring subcommittee, which consists of Shelley, Helen Fitanides is also part of the subcommittee, and Jared Boskill was part of it. At one point, he has since deferred to his colleague Alma, who is now part of the subcommittee. I'll just report out on our progress and update the council on where we're at real quickly while Nick shares this scope of work. So if you recall at the February council meeting, what we did was we as a group, as a subcommittee, we reported out to you on what we felt would be the minimum elements of an inventory of monitoring that would really capture and embody everything that's in the charter documents for the Monitoring Council, capture everything in our new strategic vision documents, our governance documents. And so in February, we went over and actually, if you scroll down just a little bit, Nick, there we go. This is what we talked to you about in February was, you know, if we were to develop this inventory, we didn't necessarily present these as data attributes. This isn't, you know, a data structure. It was more just an attempt to kind of capture what we as a subcommittee felt would be important to include in this inventory if we were to start to pull it together. And so we got together as a subcommittee in April to talk about the feedback that we got from you all and also some of the work group representatives in February. We got some good comments and some good feedback. And we got together as a group in April, and we decided that the best thing to do, and there were also some staff from the Office of Information and Management and Analysis on that call with us in April, Greg Gearhart and some of his team members, Jarma Bennett and others were part of that discussion in April. And we decided, well, what we probably need to do at this point, we seem to have pretty good consensus on minimum elements, or at least we have a good start on minimum elements. But in order to be able to come back to this body, this council, and provide information to you on what the level of effort might be for something of this nature and what the complexity likely would be, we thought the best approach would be to take a very small bite at the apple and take these minimum elements and then actually attempt to apply them to a very small subset of monitoring programs. Now we haven't decided what that subset would be, but really what this scope of work attempts to do is to spell out what that would entail. So our proposal would be to spend about the next 6 months working on a very small bite at the apple, and really what we're hoping that the council can do in reviewing this document is kind of focus on the objectives, because it really is our intent to come back to you and say, okay, if you look at objective 1, by trying to apply these minimum elements to a small bite at the apple, our intent is to come back to you and say, in 6 months, yes, we think this can be done. Here's the level of effort we anticipate, or it might be it might be a matter of this is going to take a significant level of effort and might be of a complexity that is beyond our capabilities. Whatever the case might be, we want to, rather than spend a lot of time and effort on this only to not have much to show for it. We want to take a very small stab at this, come back to you and say, okay, here's what we think, and then get feedback, input from the council before we move on and expend any more time and effort on it. We're also hoping out of this, another objective number 2 is to refine these minimum elements. Are these the right minimum elements? Did we get this right, or do we need to do some further tweaking of these? And then I think third, as a group, we talked about a third objective in this being, with this small scale proposal, we would begin to identify partners who could help us with this effort, and hopefully flesh out some workflows that can assist us along the way. So our plan, as you see in the scope, while there's not much detail here, this is we wanted to keep this short, down to 1 page, if at all possible. Our plan is to work closely with Greg and his team, OEMA team, and select one data source. We've talked with Jarma Bennett about potentially using CDIN as a data source to apply this proposed inventory of monitoring minimum elements, and actually try and build out a very small sample inventory, and then come back to you all in 6 months and report out on that. So this scope of work has been under review the last few weeks by the subcommittee, as well as the OEMA team. As you can see, Jarma Bennett has provided some good comments and questions on it. So it's not necessarily a finished product, and we would invite any comments and feedback from the council and the work groups. And I would also invite at this time other members of the subcommittee to weigh in and provide any comments, Shelley and others, if they have any thoughts. So I'll hand it over to the rest of the subcommittee before we turn it over to the council for feedback.
Thanks for that overview, Grant. And I think that we have, though we have some work to do, it's pretty clear from the original legislation that this is, and also from our strategic planning in January of 2020, that this was, the direction that was highest priority for the council. This is, our attempt to kind of put that on paper and go from there. So I think that, it's interesting that sometimes it's I've described it as the low-hanging fruit. Oh, all the information is there. We just kind of need to put it in a central area for council members and others to access. And I think Nick earlier this week described it as not low-hanging fruit. It's very complicated. So, hopefully we can meet in the middle and take a bite-sized chunk of either by region or, area of focus, area of interest, and really kind of get something that's useful to the council and to the public.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shelley, for that. So unless there are any other members of the subcommittee that want to add anything, I guess at this point, Nick, turn it over to the council for questions, comments, and feedback.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Grant. I think the other key piece is, with Shelley stepping down and Alma still kind of, I think, coming on board, and Helen out on maternity leave, Grant is kind of a one-man show with some help from, obviously, from OEMA and myself on this. So if there's any other council members that find this work to be valuable and want to weigh in and become part of the subcommittee, I think now would be the time to volunteer for that. It was voted, pretty widespread across the council members, at least, that this was the highest, or the project that should be most focused on based on the strategic plan. I think, what I was getting at earlier in the meeting here was that the inventory, one reason why the inventory has been talked about since 2008 when this first came about and hasn't been done yet, is it's not an easy thing to do. I see that Greg is happy to continue to support with his staff, which is great. And it is in line with some of the work that's being done within OEMA and SWAMP. So it does dovetail nicely in that aspect. But I think the complication is getting an inventory from many different monitoring programs across the state is difficult. So that's why we were starting with this pilot project based on some direction and discussion at the May 6th meeting with, the large data source, but the one that we had the most control over, which is in this case seed, and kind of showing what it would look like, what an inventory could look like, both visually, having some sort of visual element through a map. And there's some work already being done in SWAMP to do that, to visualize what is being sampled in seed. And so there's already some groundwork being done there. But then just showing, okay, what would an inventory need to include, which is what this is trying to get at, and the who, for whom, what, where, when, why, and how, is what would this inventory need as a bare bones kind of information before delving in deeper to help with some of the tasks that the council is mandated with, including identifying efficiencies, identifying data gaps, looking to see if some of the other actions within the strategic plan about seeing are the monitoring programs that we are doing, the Royal we in this case, doing what they're intending to do. Are they answering the questions that they were designed to answer? And so what and how should that information be gathered and presented? So this is kind of a first step towards that. And JARMA has been great in dedicating some time and looking at it from an outside perspective and providing a lot of insight. So it's just a one-page document. It's just kind of a start at trying to outline the next steps for that. And luckily, there is some OEMA staff that's helping with this, but we, having additional resources from the council and perspectives from the council on, especially the elements that you guys all expect to see or want to see, would be really valuable. So if there's, I realize that also that this is probably the first time you guys have seen it outside of the subcommittee. So I don't know if there'll be necessarily any feedback now, but if there is, we'll take it. And if there's any volunteers to help Grant and OEMA move this forward, we'd appreciate it.
And as I mentioned earlier, I'm involved in subcommittees, work groups, and I'm happy to continue work on the inventory of monitoring subcommittee. I know that a lot of the subcommittees are kind of hybrids of members that are outside of the council, and so if it's something that is needed, I'd be happy to continue the work there.
Great, thanks, Shelley.
So this is Peter. I actually have a really big interest in this. I wouldn't mind participating. My biggest concern is I just see myself getting spread so thin these days that I'm not sure of my time commitment, but I'm very interested. One of the things that I'm concerned about, and you guys already alluded to this. I mean, obviously this is kind of a first pass using seed or something like that to try and pull these data to understand what kind of monitoring is going on is great. But as a level 2, just from my background, I'm always really nervous about methodologies and comparability, and beginning some sort of repository of written methods that are being used by these programs so that it can be determined whether or not data are comparable or not is going to be essential. If we want to start pulling these together on a statewide basis, but then we find out that the methods are so different that you can't combine the data sets, that's going to be really important to know.
Thanks, Peter. That's great feedback.
Hi, this is Brian Lawrenson. I just had a quick comment. I also have an interest in this, but not much time to help, but I can support Grant to some degree. But the one thing that occurs to me, I mean, I have lots of thoughts on these items too, but it as a working session for this group, this might be a good exercise at some point soon to kind of spend some time as a group on it and talk through some of these things. I think the issues people bring up are really good, and it's, I think, really good to get the different perspectives and applications of the data that we all collect.
Thanks, Brian. Grant, is there any more that you wanted out of this item or any other feedback from council members? I think you got a couple of additional resources to at least help with the review and provide initial feedback, and which is great.
No, I appreciate all the feedback and comments, and we'll definitely take those on an ongoing basis as well. We want to keep everyone informed of what's going on, and this is potentially a fairly time-consuming effort. So I understand, Brian and Peter, why you may not necessarily want to jump in to the deep end of the pool on this, and that's fine. Anything you're willing to contribute, we're more than happy to welcome anyone who wants to be involved. And I obviously don't have an enormous amount of time to devote to this, but I think that's why we're looking to just try this on a very small scale initially, so that it doesn't spiral into something that necessarily starts to consume any one person or multiple people's time. I think that would be unfair. So I think that's really kind of the goal, as I see it, out of this, is to come back to the council and say, yes, it would, well, I guess, let me rephrase that. Come back to the council and say, depending on what the council would like to see out of this, here are some options, and but it's going to require different levels of effort depending on what option the council would like to see. I think that's where I'd like to be. I'm hopeful that we could be in about 6 months or so, is really bring some information back to the council that, look, if we put this amount of effort into it, here's what we think could be done. If we wanted something a little more robust, it would require this amount of effort. And I think that's really what the role of this subcommittee is, at least for right now, because obviously we can't put together an entire inventory of monitoring on our own realistically within the next 6 months. So the next best thing would be to come back and give you some options on how that could potentially be done, I think.
Would the council be able to offer unpaid internships to college students looking for projects?
I think the council via, I mean, I know that through the water boards, we have unpaid internship programs, which has its own HR perspective. I don't know how, and when we do, it's at least if we if we recruit them and they come to us in OEMA and there are projects at the council, we can generally, if they're of interest to the interns, then provide those. I think the key, at least from my perspective and experience with unpaid interns at the water board, is that you're trying to provide value to them, like what to get them to get something out of it, as well as and if we get something out of it, then it's a nice to have. But that's certainly an option. I just don't know how, as an entity, like the council itself could create a program like that, because just recognizing the amount of HR related work that we have to go through at the water boards for unpaid interns. So I don't know if we have the infrastructure for that necessarily, but if they're when they do come, and they do come, some on an annual basis for just a few months here, a few months there, and there are projects like this that we can have a chunk of, and they have the skill set and the desire. I generally will put those forth for them to work on.
Yeah, as somebody who utilizes a lot of interns, they can certainly bring value, but it is a labor intensive effort. And I would say if we were thinking about doing something like that, then we might want to think about creating 1 or 2 kind of permanent intern positions that we would try to fill, so that you'd know that you had some intern resources.
Sometimes just putting word out that there's this work to be done can be fruitful. In the case of the funding subcommittee, we have Wynn Calgar, who's a grad student who's on the subcommittee, and it's not an internship per se, but he's motivated and talented and bringing his skill set to that subcommittee. So there are some rare instances where you have motivated individuals who can put in their personal time.
Yeah, and I love people like that. Yeah, it's nice when you get somebody who's really valuable like that.
Yeah, I think also at some point, I mean, this could be an effort that we crowdsource help with, just like the trash datathons, solicit help and support from the volunteer community out there to help bring data together to help inform trash management efforts and so forth. I think likewise, I mean, this could, eventually once we have it well defined, or better defined what exactly it is that we're trying to do here and how we're trying to do it, I think, could make for potentially good, potentially good topic to be part of a datathon somewhere down the road. Who knows?
Sure, all good points. And before I get to Anna, who's got her hand up, I just want to say that this is, in recognition of Field of Dreams Day, this was very much, first it was like, okay, this was a priority, but what is it? What is this inventory supposed to look like? So that's what we're trying to kind of figure out here with this pilot project, with the idea that, okay, if we leverage OEMA resources to do an inventory of what's in Seedon, for example, and say, okay, look how valuable this could be, that if you build it, others will be, they will come, they will want to say, hey, I want my project to be in there. I want my monitoring program to be included on something like this, and kind of grow from there, which is kind of what this is getting at, and kind of crowdsource it in that way, recognizing that as an entity, we don't have access to all the monitoring we done in the state. We have good access to the state stuff through the AB 1755, but that's just a small drop in the bucket. With that said, Anna, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Holder. You'll be hearing from me in a minute about the Data Science Symposium, but just on the topic of unpaid internships, I think interns are awesome, and you will definitely get folks who are able to provide services without payment, but this could be a really great point where the council kind of incorporates equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice into their processes in a substantial way by prioritizing finding funding to support those interns. Because then the great thing about that is you'll increase your pool of folks that'll be able to apply and increase perspectives and diversity and all sorts of relationships through that process. So that's just something I wanted to put out there as maybe a longer term, or hopefully medium to long term goal, is if you're thinking about having council interns, prioritizing funding to financially support them and compensate them for their skills and time would be awesome.
I'm glad you brought that up, Anna. That's something that we discussed a lot in the JEDI Council subcommittee meetings, that bringing people in to kind of get their talents, their expertise, should be something that's compensated on some level. And it's well taken, your point about having a paid position. The other thing is that Grant, I thought your idea about the just incorporating this type of theme into a future data science symposium or hackathon would be a fantastic idea. Maybe there's a prize or something like that, but it would be something that we've seen previous efforts to draw in a tremendous talent. So this seems like it would be a good fit.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. Greg put in the chat that I mentioned the Water Data Challenge earlier in my updates, but that would be a great venue for kind of describing the project more fully and then putting it out there, because that actually effort has funding, at least for the next couple of years, through NSF funds as 4 prizes, and that attracts some of the more robust data scientists to work on that. So if we could, even that could be another action of the subcommittee, would be to better maybe take what's written here and turn it into a better project description that can be leveraged by something like the Water Data Challenge or Water Data Collaborative. Okay, well, great discussion. I think we got some people that we can include at least on meeting scheduling, whether they have the bandwidth or not, which is great, and we can build on this moving forward. Let's move on to item 8. An update on the 6th annual data symposium. If you haven't had a chance to, the recordings are available on YouTube, and there was a day 0 where they did a great screening of PIA, and day 1 was just awesome. Had a lot of JEDI information there, and day 3 was great as well. Day 2, I should say. So with that, I'll let Greg and Anna kind of take it away, since I was not able to participate as much as I did in the past.
And I'll just ask if Anna, you seem to have some prepared thoughts. If you want, I can do it, but I yield.
Why don't we tag team? I'll start and feel free to jump in as you have additional thoughts to add. So first, I put the link to the Science Symposium page in the chat, and as Nick said, recordings and notes and other resources are available there. Yeah, so this was our 6th annual Water Data Science Symposium, and the theme this year was Beyond Open Data, Radical Inclusivity for Water Data Equity. You'll notice the kind of themes over the years have been starting to get geared more and more towards equity and inclusivity, and doing so in a radical and urgent way. Our keynote speaker is the director of California Transcends, Ebony Harper, and she gave us an awesome, just educational moment talking about intersectionality and defining radical inclusivity and what those terms mean from her experience, and giving us a little bit of history on the transgender community in California and all over the world. I mean, and Nick, you talked about day 0. So before the launch of the symposium, we also had film screening of PIA, and we partnered with the Owens Valley Indian Water Commission to make that happen, and also had a panel discussion afterwards, really highlighting and elevating tribal voices and issues that they're continuing to have with water and resources in California. And all these topics are sometimes challenging for folks to say and hear, but the vibe throughout the symposium was one of like open and honest discussion and support, and finding ways to partner with each other to, you know, change the way things have been. On June 30th, we had we partnered with the California Society of Freshwater Science to kind of include emerging academics into the conversation, and they gave awesome talks on the work that they've been doing. One which that I wanted to highlight was specifically from the perspective of, let me find their name, but Robin Lopez, who is a PhD student at the University of Berkeley, and he spoke really poignantly on ecological racism and his experiences with that, and how seeking equity and justice via social and cultural competency is an urgent need for anyone in the sciences. And we wrapped up the last day with a conversation and panel discussion on racial equity, and really kind of like a brainstorm session. So that was opened with Dr. Lydia Jennings, who does a lot of great work on Indigenous data sovereignty. And she gave us a brief but really powerful crash course on what that means and why it's important, and how we as researchers and agency folks and others can kind of incorporate those fair and care principles. I know that's a little bit of jargon if you weren't there, so I'll encourage you to check out the website and the notes to find out what that means, to empower Indigenous data governance and sovereignty. And then we had other speakers, myself included, talking about the realignment that Peter mentioned earlier. Jamie Yoon from Cal Recycle talking about the pollution and prejudice work happening in Cali, PA. Tara Moran, the executive director of the California Water Data Consortium, who is really kind of acknowledging that they haven't embarked on this work yet in you know, like in terms of achieving specific successes, but they're willing to learn and participate and engage and support the effort moving forward. And then Walker Whelan from OEHA talking about Cal Enviroscreen and the new updates and how those resources can help anyone interested in racial equity, you know, data and the correlations between pollution burden and environmental variables in California. And some of the main points that I took away from that conversation was really the importance of having specific intentional projects to promote and elevate and increase justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in the work that we do. You know, we need the data to make informed decisions. So prioritizing projects to synthesize and collect and interpret that data is critical, but then also incorporating the racial equity lens throughout all the work that we do. Without a special project, having a single racial equity person in a department or even a team is really not enough to correct and rectify the institutional and systemic racial inequities that exist in all institutions in the United States and beyond. So having open, sometimes uncomfortable conversations and acknowledging the really difficult work ahead is going to be crucial. And also including tribal governments, partners, and those from underserved, underrepresented communities early in conversations, and really elevating them in partnership with the work that we do as early as possible and throughout the process is going to be critical for incorporating, you know, and really seeing and operationalizing racial equity in our work. And I've been talking a lot, so Greg, feel free to add anything else. There was a lot there. There's no way that either of us can kind of summarize it in a way to really bring you up to speed without participating. So I would really encourage you to check out the recordings, and there's notes after the program an agenda with contacts and resources that were shared in the chat throughout the conference. So I encourage folks to check that out as well.
If Greg doesn't have anything to add, I have a couple comments.
Go for it.
I just want to thank Greg and Anna and Owima for their leadership in bringing this theme to the Data Science Symposium, and I'm very excited in integrating that kind of work, as you said, Anna, so eloquently throughout the work that we all do. And that was something that we discussed last year when we started the JEDI subcommittee, and it's just very exciting to see that kind of support, and that it can really flourish in other areas of our work. So thank you.
Thanks, Shelley.
Yeah, I'm really, I'd ask that this be kind of highlighted during this agenda item, because it's such a nice tie-in to the next agenda item, and I hope that we do have that strong connection going forward.
Yeah, hi, I'll just say that there's two takeaways still kind of underway in my mind. One is I'm still trying to figure out, and I think our team is trying to curate out of all the presentations. There's lots of new resources and data, both in the data category and just work that's being done. And that's above and beyond just the equity discussion that we just had. So there's just it's a rich community that every year kind of blows me away with how much progress and iteration happens, and whether it's on harmful algal blooms or on other topics that are hot and near to everything council and Owima. So there's a lot of digesting in my mind still going on. And then the other takeaway is we had a follow-up meeting after the workshop session on advancing water racial equity and data with Tara Moran from the Water Data Consortium. And we're gonna try to keep a momentum going on that component. We hope to come out in a month or so and talk about some of the things that we envision as being follow-ups from this year's symposium. And the vision was to kind of iterate in that area of advancing water data equity every year, so that we would sort of check in at these annual events. But we welcome partnerships, and in fact, the work is all about partnerships. So to the extent that members of the council or members of the audience listening today want to partner on advancing water data equity, let one of us know, and we'll try to keep you in the loop. And it'll probably focus on tribal in one thematic area, whether it's advancing, advancing some infrastructure at the state side so that we are better at engaging and listening to some of the indigenous sovereignty interests, or like policies, for example, or guidance for staff on how to address and be aware of data sovereignty as they do their work. Or it may be ways to literally create data exchange capacity across the water quality sector to really advance the interests and the outcomes that are desired, like fewer harmful algal blooms or better risk communication or reduced impacts from water availability drought / issues. So things like that will probably be in the area, in the work plan area that we're going to address. So thanks everyone.
Yeah, thanks for those additions, Greg. I was tempted to talk about our consortium conversation, but I didn't know if we could provide those spoilers yet. So I'm so glad you did. And that's a really exciting next step for the conversations that happened at the symposium, to really continue those conversations and work together to find concrete ways to operationalize racial equity and justice into the work that we do throughout California and the council and all the other agency partners. So it's an exciting space to be in, and we're looking forward to seeing where it goes, being part of that.
Thanks,
I've seen
Anna.
a lot of growth in different agencies on different levels in this topic, and I think that the leadership that you're bringing and the visibility that you're bringing to this issue can't be understated. it's really, really critical that other agencies see what's going on and that we're giving attention to it, and that we're trying to make progress, because they will follow suit.
Any other feedback or questions for Anna and or Greg?
Yeah, real quick, Nick, I just wanted to just kind of echo Shelley's sentiments and just thank Greg, Anna, the whole team for doing a great job with this year's symposium. I really, really enjoyed sitting through, observing the presentations. I was blown away just at how many different presentations there were on, just incredible ways that organizations, stakeholders, others are using data to drive decisions and make and make other or take other management actions and also inform stakeholders. And I just think it's really exciting to see the progression, and I agree wholeheartedly with Shelley that these data science symposiums have been a big catalyst in the evolution that's happened over the last several years. So thank you all for supporting all that.
And just one more plug. I know Grant doesn't want any more attention, but that initial project that they won an award in 2016 for has now evolved into a working prototype, not even a prototype, it's a working data dashboard that delivers information to decision makers. And that was kind of thematic of, like, even Rafa from Spain was watching and said things like, this used to be about aspirational ideas. If we could do this, if we had something like this, or here's an idea of a prototype of a thing that might be kind of cool. And we're now like in this phase where people show up and they're talking about projects that are informing real decision making. And it's just, it's caught a lot of us, I think, by surprise this year. So anyway, thanks everyone for all that feedback.
Great, thanks again. Well, that dovetails nicely into item 9, which is the update from the JEDI committee. Shelley? Oops.
Oh, it helps to unmute myself. If you don't mind, Nick, I'm going to share my screen. All right, so you should see the update from the JEDI Council Subcommittee. Do you see that? Yes, okay, great. So as we've heard discussed a couple times today, the JEDI Council Subcommittee has not met in the past few months. And one issue we've talked about before, just the Monitoring Council in general. Gosh, we have some great ideas, but a lot of them require effort and funding. And the JEDI Council is something that is very near and dear to my heart, and something I initiated because it's something that I do in my personal life. And likewise with this work, I'm doing it on my personal time. It's not something that I've been asked to do by others, and I haven't seen a lot of feedback that's something I should be involved in. And so that's part of the issue of why it's been a little quiet. And I'm Peter and I and others are going to put our heads together to bring more in-kind support to this project, so it's not just done at 11 at night, that kind of thing. And so with that, I just want to share just a refresher on what is the JEDI Council Subcommittee. Education is a really foundational component to the committee, because without having a common understanding and language to talk about these issues that can be quite sensitive, it's really hard to make progress and just stay moving forward. So we've had two educational modules that Greg graciously educated the council, and it was really valuable, and we're hoping that that would continue. And yet now our council meetings are half the length that they used to be. So we need to kind of figure out how that would fit in with the new structure of the council. If we're meeting half the time, is it? And we want to bring this stuff to the entire council and to the public in general. Taking advantage of the fact that this is recorded and put on the largest social media platform that exists, YouTube. So it has a huge reach, and that educational component is critical. But it's not solely for our enrichment. It's not just for education, just for the sake of being educated. It's to move forward the progress in bringing equity and inclusion and diversity to not just the council, but to all water data issues and water quality monitoring, and bringing to light what those issues are. And so to do that, we need to have data-driven projects, and that's why it's very exciting with the previous agenda item that we have that just ready-made connections with OEMA that could happen. We also recognized early on when we did meet quite a bit when we first formed. We met 3 times in 2 months, and we recognized that our own makeup of the JEDI Council Subcommittee is not very diverse in terms of any measure of diversity. And that we not only wanted to increase diversity, but also help groups that are already doing this work to so that we don't reinvent the wheel. If there's already people that are doing this work, we have a nice platform that we could support them, and it'd be very mutually beneficial. So we did identify several groups to begin with this outreach, and we drafted an outreach letter to them. And there was a lot of back and forth on the letter. And then I actually attended a meeting in June that the executive director of one of these groups had attended. And so I reached out to her, and it was for the Environmental Justice Coalition for Water. And so we have some of these connections already forming. So it's very exciting that we can work with some of these groups, and they're doing what we want to do. So other connections that we're working on is maybe we have Mark Gold as a co-chair of this council, and he's also leading the Ocean Protection Council. And they were the first meeting that I had attended where I saw this issue really brought to light in June of 2020. I was inspired. Everyone in the virtual room was inspired by what occurred during that meeting, and that's what led me to bring that up to this council. So I'm hoping that there's some way that we can collaborate, align, help each other, and bring forth some of these common goals. And they are working on some projects right now, and it would be neat to learn more about that and bring that to the monitoring council. As Anna mentioned, it's not just it shouldn't be a centralized effort only. There should be elements in our strategic plan, in our core values. If we can incorporate this into the entire council makeup, that would be the goal. But we're taking baby steps. We're not going to change 400 years of white supremacy and racism overnight. And part of that is giving ourselves time and doing it right. And also, if we make mistakes, that's okay. We're going to brush ourselves off and keep moving forward. So that is mostly what I wanted to give as an update. And also just, I did reach out to Anna during the last council meeting, and I was very excited for her to agree to be part of the JEDI Council Subcommittee. And so I'm looking forward to getting together with her and others and really making more progress on bringing those knowledgeable voices in and moving forward. So that's all I have. Questions? Comments?
Any thoughts, comments?
Okay.
Well, hopefully, the subcommittee can reconvene and better focus on some actions and suggestions moving forward. For the council and its work groups to take on.
Greg has his
Kelly,
hand
you're
up.
on mute.
Okay.
Oh. Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted on that last item, I wanted to make a couple observations. Not actually being asked to make these, but I'm going to make them anyway. There's a lot working in progress that's happening on advancing racial equity. And there's a lot in the space of water. And the water boards are now pretty far down a path of getting a resolution to our board. If you haven't seen the water board's resolution, I highly recommend it. It's something I'm proud to say I'm a member of the team that helped shape some of that. It's incredible, but by no means was it a single person. It's an incredible amount of research and thought that went into that resolution document. Now that said, it's just it's the beginning, and the council started on this path of having these conversations and asking for some dialogue, coach and leading by myself. You call it training maybe, but I call it just leading dialogues, and it's iterative. It should really absolutely be a continuous process for organizations to go through that normalizing stage. And so I highly recommend that the council find a way, whatever you call the sessions that we started, I recommend you find a way to continue having these dialogues. The other, the really interesting part to me is this morning I met with the Department of Water Resources, a group of folks there doing racial equity advanced work at the department. They're new to this. They're behind the water boards in terms of timing, but they're also, as you know, a very big player in this space. So, and the Coastal Commission is considered probably out ahead of the water boards. So when you start looking at the space that we are in, this opportunity is not something to sort of think about as a triage. Like, do we have the bandwidth? Do we have the whatever? It's a different dynamic that's going on of going with the flow is probably the model that comes in my head. And I am here to help and support in any way that means. And so the final thing I'll say is the Resources Agency recently hired an assistant secretary for environmental justice and equity named Moy, as we know him, because he used to work alongside us at the water board, and he's incredible. So there's a lot happening that is coming down through the different channels and up from the bottom and sideways in from the actual communities that we're trying to serve. So I would really recommend continued dialogue on this at the council. And I don't quite know how to put a point into that recommendation, but those are my thoughts, and thanks.
Thanks, Greg. Your contributions and input are critical and very appreciated. So thank you.
I think those are great points, Greg. And I think that from my perspective, I think that that would be the role of the subcommittee or committee, or if it turns into a work group, to kind of outline and discuss as a group the best venue and forum for continuing those dialogues, whether that be at a public facing council meeting or at just regular meetings that are happening within this group that's open to all and encouraged for all to attend, to talk about these issues and how to approach them on a global, but as well as a more focused water quality based scale, and then having active report backs to the council for feedback and that information. I recall from previous meetings and as these dialogues and kind of trying to decide on how we wanted to kind of focus them in further within the council, it seemed a little bit more strained. And so I think that one of the key founding focuses for this subcommittee should be to focus on the best way to have productive and active dialogues and continued dialogues and discussions moving forward, and reporting back and encouraging participation from the council members and the work groups and anyone interested in sharing information too, because I think we all are part of different aspects and seeing different things and sharing those experiences and trainings and ideas and readings and videos and actions, and is kind of the role of this group. This is a little bit different than the subcommittees. I view this one, and this is kind of was talked about at some of the first subcommittee meetings at that time, was that this, because of this longevity, a subcommittee generally of the council is short-lived and is designed to focus on maybe a more discrete issue and try to solve it. This is obviously not that. So it does need to be something that's actively considered on a second by second basis, daily basis, and onward. It's not something that's going to be solved per se, but so it's a little bit different, and maybe it turns into more of a work group rather than a quote unquote subcommittee.
And that's one reason we need, we're going to work towards having space on the Monitoring Council portal, which was approved, not unanimously, but approved by the council. And I think that'll be really important to bring some permanence and also just visibility to the public to see that this is something that's important to us and that we're committed to.
Great. I look forward to future JEDI work group meetings. Oops, keep on doing that. With that, on to item 10. We are a little bit ahead of schedule at this point, but that's great. That's okay. Here are some agenda items. A couple more have popped up in the interim as a result of this meeting, like a report back from the co-chairs and myself on maybe a draft recognition process for, maybe somewhat iron out more of the details on nominations and what the recognition will look like, as well as hopefully an update on how the recognition went for the wastewater based surveillance and epidemiology groups. Any others that are some of the other potential topics that have risen to the top from previous meetings? I know we talked about microplastics playbook. I'm not sure if the playbook will be ready. I know Squirp and Scott, there is supposed to be a report out on the work that's being spearheaded by Squirp on potential thresholds of microplastics in aquatic life, I believe. Steve could correct me if I'm wrong. That could be an interesting item. I think that's
right, so I think I'm not sure what is being referred to as the playbook, because I don't know that there's a playbook.
No, there's not.
But I think this is a wonderful topic because you have two things that are coming up that will take place before November. The first is that Scott Coffin will be making a presentation to the State Water Board on what is their plan for moving forward with microplastics monitoring in drinking water. And that's everything from methodology to frequency of sampling to data interpretation. And I think it would be a good thing for the council to hear. Similarly, the Ocean Protection Council has the requirement to put out a management plan for ocean microplastics, of which monitoring is a piece. And while that document is not due to the end of the year, I'm aware that they're going to be floating a draft in October for feedback. So it seems like those would be good things for us to hear and then to figure out. I'm not in love with just hearing presentations. I'm in love with trying to figure out what role that council can play in improving those things. And I think microplastics is a great one because it's one that cuts across everything from fresh water to salt water, everything from water to biota, even all the way to human health associated with water. So I think we should hear it not just as a report, but what's the role the council should play. Strongly endorse it.
I'd like to add an item if 1066 gets signed by the governor, we're going to have to hit the ground running. We're not going to have time to screw around. And so we'll need to have an item that, how we plan to address it and move it forward and assign our freshwater beach monitoring group, whatever it is we need to do, we need to start talking about it right away. So I think that'll be a big one. Anna.
Hi, yeah, so I, along with Jay, we're co-chairs of the Safety Work Group, and we've kind of been throwing around this realignment stuff over the past couple of meetings. And if there's time on the agenda, in November, we will have had 2 meetings with the realignment team in San Diego. And so that might be a good time to give you all an update on that and other awesome work that the Safety Work Group has been doing.
Awesome. Great idea. Greg, you have your hand up as well.
Sorry, that's old.
Okay.
Go team.
All right. Any other ideas? We'll, of course, query our other co-chair in the interim as well. But I don't think I saw, oh yeah, Chad, is there anything from Resources Agency that you think would be appropriate for the council November 10th? Okay.
Nothing at this time, but I can definitely check in with Mark as well, and we'll see if there's anything we want to put up.
Yeah, we usually have a pre-meeting with the co-chairs, and so we'll be reaching out to Mark ourselves.
Well, great ideas. I think we could have a full agenda and potentially have a maybe longer, depending on what happens to 1066. Do we know, Karen, or do you know off the top of your head the timing on that?
I don't, but
okay.
I can commit to following up with an email after this meeting.
Great. All right, with that, thank you, everybody. It was a great meeting. Glad to be back, and looking forward to the work to be done in the interim for next time. The meeting will be up by the end of the day. Keep up the good work.
Right.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to see you.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see you.